Petr Yan, where has it all gone wrong? Now that's a loaded question. So if we cast our mind back a little bit, back to 2019 when at UFC 245 when Petr Yan fought Uriah Faber and ended up TKOing him in the third round, and it was one of the most brutal displays I've seen from bantamweight in a while, and it was borderline bullying, to be fair. And watching that fight, you really thought Yan was going to be a real contender in this division and probably be champion. You know, the way he was beating everybody, it seemed almost like it just seemed obvious and a formality. And then you look at then going the year after, obviously 2020 was a bit of a crazy year, but then we had Petr Yan fighting Aldo for the belt after Cejudo had retired, and it was a weird fight to make. Yan definitely was the contender who should have fought for the belt, but then I don't know, Aldo. I think Aldo, just if I remember correctly, he was just coming off a loss to Marlon Moraes, so it was a weird time. And at the same time, you had Corey Sandhagen and Aljamain Sterling who were fighting, and it was a bit of a weird time in the bantamweight division. But the way broke down Aldo, he lost the first two, if I remember. You know, he definitely lost the first one. Aldo took him off his feet with the leg kick, I remember, in the first round. But then in the rounds prior, or coming up, he was slowly starting to pick it up here, and eventually, you remember, he got Aldo out of there in the fifth round. Aldo took way too many shots in that fight when he was on the ground with the ground and pound, but it was an amazing performance from Yan, and you looked at that and thought, this guy, he's looking like he's going to beat everybody. And then he fights Aljamain Sterling now. Coming into this fight, I didn't do a preview at the time on the channel, but I thought at the time that Sterling was going to beat him simply because I felt as if the grappling and also the opponents that Sterling had fought in comparison to Yan, I don't know, I just felt like he just pull it out. It would be surprising because he would pull it out. A little bit like what happened in the second fight, funnily enough. So coming into this fight, you know, it was a lot of expectation. A lot of people thought Yan was going to win. A lot of the UFC brass kind of picked Sterling because obviously they're friends with him. He does a lot of punditry, if you can call that, analyst work for the UFC. And I felt like that was sort of the reason why a lot of people were massively going in favour of Sterling. However, coming into the fight and when the fight began, we kind of could see from very early that this fight was going to go one way. Sterling started off like he sniffed all kinds of coke and just came out so excited in the first round. For everything, Yan was just very energetic, and I think he was trying to overwhelm Yan, which I could kind of see the plan. I mean, we're going to go in later why that plan probably is very effective against Yan, but he just spent too much energy doing it and didn't really have the striking, I felt, to back it up. Had to pressure to an extent in the grappling, but just couldn't really. He had the tools, but didn't use them in the way I feel he should have. And he also got dropped in the first round. Then the second round came, it was much the same, and Yan was able to take Sterling down at ease. And then you then go into rounds 3, 4, and it's looking like it's going the same way. But then we all remember what happened. Sterling's in the position where his hands are down and he's on the canvas, and Yan decides to knee a downed opponent, which we all know you can't do against the rules, and he got disqualified. Now, for whatever reason, everybody decided to hate Sterling for this because it was his fault, obviously, that he got kneed in the head. But look, Yan's a great fighter, but he's a very dirty fighter. This is no secret. You know, there have been times when he's been pulling people's hair. You saw against Sterling, like I said, kneeing him in the head. I mean, it's pretty clear, even if you feel like he isn't a downed opponent, you really want to risk it. And what it is just a cheat sort of tactic. And I'm not against it completely, simply because even though it's against the rules, this is a fight, you do whatever. It's one reason why I kind of like John Jones in that sense. Even though I don't like his eye poking and stuff, I do sort of understand the sort of dark arts to it. But Yan, for some reason, was sort of like still kind of the champion to a lot of people after that. And then supposed to fight Sterling, but then Sterling had neck surgery, I think it was. So then the fight kind of got pushed and delayed, and then Yan fought Sandhagen for the interim belt. And an amazing fight, and obviously got the victory over Sandhagen via Yan's decision over 5 rounds. And you kind of saw in that fight that Yan was easily the best guy in that division at that time. The way he just dominates people, the way he's striking it. I mean, a lot of people felt like, you know, who was going to beat this guy. Even after he did his qualification to Sterling, technically it's a loss, but really, he dominated what was supposed to be the second best guy in this division. And you thought, God, this guy could go on to be the greatest ever at bantamweight. The way he just dominates and systematically breaks you down, it's frightening. And he's a savage. You look at him, he's always trying to fight with people backstage, not in an aggressive way, but almost just in a playful way. But he just has that thing in him. Also being from Siberia, there's an image we all have of Russian fighters, whether they're from Dagestan, Siberia, whatever. There's always that thing there. And then we then go on to when he fights Aljamain Sterling 2. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting. So, he lost the fight to Aljamain Sterling. I felt like it was the right decision. However, some people thought it was a robbery, but regardless, he fought very emotional in that fight, yeah. And in 2 and 3, he lost himself the fight because he swung so wildly and Sterling was able to take his back and control him. I know a lot of people say there's no damage there, but the fact that you can't have your back taken, to me, for majority of the round and win the round makes no sense. 2 and 3 was easy to Sterling. 4 and 5 was to Yan. It just depends how he scored the first. And the first, even though Sterling didn't have any real solid shots, I felt like it was clear enough for like the amount of strikes Sterling was landing. I did a review and a preview of it, and I felt both times it was the correct decision. I didn't feel like there was anything wrong with it, but Yan obviously felt judged. And then he fought Sean O'Malley, Yan, at UFC 280 in Abu Dhabi on the Makhachev and Oliveira card, and an incredible fight. But let's not get this twisted. I mean, alright, I really rate O'Malley. I think he will be a champion one day, but Yan was supposed to wipe the floor with him comfortably. That's what everybody said. It was supposed to be an easy win for Yan, and he was supposed to get it done. Whatever. And he lost the fight. Now, another one. A lot of people thought this was a robbery. If you look at the way the fight went, Yan was able to implement his wrestling quite well in the first. Second round, he got hurt and rocked a little bit, and then the same thing in the third. Now, second round, I think I gave to O'Malley. Third, I could see. I think I did give it to Yan, if I remember correctly. I have to cast my mind back, but it was one of those, a little bit like the Volkanovski Makhachev fight, where I could see why you give it the other way to O'Malley, though, but everybody acted like it was a complete travesty, that it wasn't even close, and that it should have been to Yan. It's just, again, Yan, I felt like there was an issue with his fighting style where he picks it, and that's why I picked O'Malley to win the fight initially. Yan starts too slow in these fights. He waits and waits for his opponent to slowly break down, and he's like a little bit like what Terence Crawford does and Lomachenko. Eventually he starts to figure you out, and once he does, that's when you see him really take over. When you got that only works when you're fighting 5-round fights. When you're fighting in 3-round fights, that wasn't effective, and that's why I picked it. O'Malley to win. Close fight, you could pick Yan, I wouldn't be mad at it, but the fact is he lost the fight, and he's now on a 2-fight losing streak. And again, a lot of people thinking Yan maybe still could be the guy in the champ. He could still be a champion, People thought he won the Aljamain Sterling fight. People thought he won the O'Malley fight. It is almost a thing of him being robbed by the judges in both fights. Almost like a people's champion, almost. But you saw now, recently, this past weekend, Yan fought Merab dvalishvili and it wasn't a pretty performance from dvalishvili, very similar to what Usman used to do to guys, but he dominated Yan in this fight. It was not even close. I think I never thought I would give a fight where I'd give all 5 rounds to a guy against Petr Yan, but I did. It was dominant, and Yan just looks lost in there, and he looks lost now in his career. 3 fights he's lost now, Yan. And age-wise, he's not old. I think when he won the belt, I feel like he was 27. Yeah, right, he's currently 30, so he's still very young in his career. However, I think a change needs to be made with the way he fights. I said it before, I think he fights too much off the back foot, and MMA, when you have guys who are aggressive wrestlers, that's not going to work. It's the same problem that Woodley had. Woodley was happy being on the back foot and just landing it overhand right and picking his moments where he would wrestle, but when you're fighting guys who are going to push you back and set the pace, that isn't going to work, and that's what you saw with Yan. He needs to, I think, make that change there. But I want to go with this video because he was supposed to be Petr Yan. the man in this division, the champion, the guy who's beating everybody. And he was on such a good streak. He won the belt, clearly. Was dominating the guy who is now the champion, Aljamain Sterling, and was on his way to clearly win it. Aljamain was not going to do... I mean, I'm not going to say never, but I could not see him doing Leon Edwards and pulling out a head kick or a flying knee. His punch power isn't great, so there's nothing he really could have done, I felt, to Yan. And Yan was in complete control in that fight. And it's almost as if Yan just wanted to inflict more punishment. And this is where I say fight IQ needs to be better. He was on his way to winning that fight. It was so clear. And whilst everybody can hate Aljamain Sterling for milking it and getting the disqualification, look at them both now. Sterling's about to fight Henry Cejudo in a massive fight in a main event pay-per-view. Yan has just lost his third fight in a row. This shows you how quickly things can change. And it did not change because of the craziness of fighting and the way some guys like Tony Ferguson go really high and really low. It changed because of Yan's, I want to say, stupidity, because you didn't need to do that in that fight. You had the fight won. You didn't need to, but now that knee has almost sent Yan's career into this complete spiral downwards, and I just wonder where he goes from here now, because now I'm seeing people say that Cody Garbrandt could beat Yan. I'm seeing people really write Yan off now and think that he can never be champion again. It's crazy how this has completely flipped when a year or so ago he was looking like the best bantamweight division and a guy who's going to dominate everybody, but now his stock's fallen massively, and I still think he could be champion, but I just think there's certain changes in his style that needs to be made. Against dvalishvili, I feel he couldn't really get anything going because dvalishvili was just so aggressive and broke a record, I think, for the amount of takedowns attempted. dvalishvili didn't really land any of them, to be honest. He landed a few here and there, but nothing big and major. But I think against a guy like that is where you need to try and push him back, but the problem that Yan had is he just naturally fights off the back foot, and I think, in my opinion, that's a change that needs to be made. But losing 3 fights in a row when you're 30 years old, in your prime of your career, and you were once a champion, and you are seen as one of the best fighters in the UFC, it's very, very poor. And I just wonder where's this come from Yan? It feels as if his stock is just dropping fight by fight. And again, even if you thought he won Aljamain Sterling fight, he still allowed his back to be taken for two of the 5 rounds. If you're some world-class pound for one of the best fighters in the world, you don't let that happen. You maybe allow, like, Kamaru Usman as an example. I know he got knocked out against Edwards, but he got his back taken in the first round. Rounds after that, he never let it happen again. He made sure he was tight after that. Yes, he got knocked out in the 5th. Poor concentration. But point being, he showed his experience. He showed that, right, that's not happening again. And he went out there and put it on Edwards. Fortunately for him, wasn't able to avoid the head kick, but he still did enough in that fight to show you that mentally this is why this guy's a champion. When Yan, he fought emotional. He fought like he wanted to really hurt Sterling. And the problem that you got is when you fight emotional, this is why you don't fight emotional. You make mistakes. And that's what happened against Sterling. Then against Sean O'Malley, I felt as if he made so many just sloppy mistakes against O'Malley. He fought well in the first, but then the fact that you were able to let yourself be caught. Let's not get to it. I think, was it O'Malley? I want to say that Yan was the first ranked opponent O'Malley fought. It was something along them lines. And the fact that he put on the fight that he did. O'Malley's a great fighter, don't get twisted, but there should have been a lot more using your experience with your Petr Yan, old man him a little bit, but he didn't do that. And he essentially fought his game. And when you go at the end of the 3rd round, you lose the fight, you can't complain. You allowed that to happen. You should have had that fight easily in the bag, but you didn't because you were sloppy. I think he felt like O'Malley, I don't think, was worth his time in there, and I think that's sort of why he let the fight kind of get away from him. Again, if you think he won, fair enough, but the fact is he was supposed to wipe O'Malley and he didn't. And then you go into dvalishvili, same thing. Again, I thought he'd win that fight, Yan, but again, he makes the same mistakes. it seems as if he's got to this point when after he beat Sandhagen, where his mind is almost as if he knows how good he is and he feels like that can work against anybody. He doesn't really adapt his game per se. Like against Uriah Faber, he was very aggressive in there. Yeah, after the second round, he whooped him all over. And look, Faber's an old man and legend, but the way he was still able to implement that style, you just think the great fighters I always feel can adapt their game to any opponent. You look at someone like Usman, for example. He against Colby decided, because of the wrestling, he'd be smart to make it more of a kickboxing bout. Against Leon Edwards, again, I know he lost the fight, but you look at it, it was one thing. He decided to grapple with him. You use what you got, and I don't think Jan's ever really fully understood that, stylistically that is not always going to work. And this is why I felt, even though Yan was a great fighter, and when he was champion, I felt there will be somebody to beat him, because he fights the same way himself every single time. And like I said, every time somebody is going to make that adjustment. Look at Ngannou when he fought Cyril Gane, knocking everybody out. He couldn't knock him out, so what does he do? He decides to switch up and wrestle with him to try and get himself back into it. You use what you got, is my point. And I don't think Jan's ever really fully grasped that in mixed martial arts. I don't think I don't think I've ever seen him since he's won the bout fight any differently. And I think now he's at a point where people are making him pay for it. And at 30, I'm not gonna say he's washed, because he's not. I don't think he is, but he's looking like he is, though, which is the problem. Again, I personally still think he can win the bout, but when you're 30 years old and you're on a free fight losing skid, when you're in the prime of your career, you're supposed to be beating everybody. There's a problem there, and I just wonder mentally how much of a toll as it's taken out of Yan. But I don't know, interesting. I mean, next for him, there's some fights. I mean, Garbrandt will be a good fight. There's some big fights for him to make. He's still a name, but honestly, you lose another one, and then you may be looking at getting kicked out of the UFC, because let's be honest, the UFC don't really care who you are. You may be a big name, you may be doing a lot of stuff, but there's not much. You can only go so far with UFC until you lose it. The fact that they got rid of Joe Romero tells you they will get rid of anybody. Darren Till, I know he's down to asked to leave, but the fact that Darren Till has also just left the UFC shows you, even if you're a big name, they are willing to cut ties. And I just think for Yan, I think you take a long time to prepare, and you make sure you just don't change who you are, but you just change your approach in certain fights. If you feel that way of picking your opponent apart and fighting on the back foot, I think works against most fighters, but against some fighters it isn't going to work, and that's where you need to make that adaptation. But interesting to see where he goes from here, though. Yan, he's still a very good fighter, but I just wonder crazy how this guy was, like I said, supposed to be the man in the division. He was the champion. He was scary. He was from Russia. He's beating everybody, and now one dumb mistake, and his career has gone into a downward spiral. And we are looking at now a fighter who was a champion to a guy who's on a free fight losing skid. And I'll be honest, doesn't look like improving anytime soon. So adjustments need to be made. But just my thoughts on Petr Yan's loss of the weekend. And yeah, until next time.